What's going on, guys? My name is Arrow, and in today's video, I'm bringing you my possible build of the league already, Dual Strike of Ambidexterity CI Trickster. Let's go. All right, let's get started with the two elephants in the room. This is a little bit more expensive than builds that I usually put together. I don't have an exact value for you. Everything is very volatile this league, and a lot of my gear is crafted. You try to go buy the gear that I have, it's going to be insanely expensive.
That looks expensive. Is that expensive?
Look, have to be willing to craft. But I will show you in the video how I crafted each gear piece that I have. It's actually pretty straightforward. So if you want to play this build, just know you got to be willing to do a little bit of crafting.
Craft? What craft?
Number two, it uses a mage blood. I usually don't use mage bloods in builds, and to be honest, this one doesn't actually require a mage blood. I just wanted to use one because I had so much currency from all the boss rushing that I've been doing that it felt silly to make a build that cost 50 divines when I had 600 sitting in my stash. So with how easy it is to make currency this league, I didn't feel so bad about making a little bit more expensive of a build. What I recommend that you do, if you do not have a lot of currency, go back and you watch my video on boss rushing. It's incredibly profitable. Some of the prices have come down. Some of them have actually continued to rise. So it's still very, very profitable. Any build can do it. So if you need to make some currency, go check out that video. So what is it? Dual Strike of Ambidexterity.
Performance says that you're ambidextrous.
Dual Strike hits with both weapons, but Dual Strike of Ambidexterity hits with both weapons and only uses your offhand attack time. It also gives you 70% more damage with your main hand. So that means you're basically playing a sort of stat stick in each hand build where you need specific things from each hand.
He's ambidextrous. That's what I was trying to tell you when you came in tonight.
So your main hand, you want to get a ton of damage. Attack speed does not matter. In this build, we are going lightning lucky damage, which means we're not critting, which means our main hand just needs to be as much damage as possible. For that, we're using the ephemeral edge. It makes it so you get a portion of your energy shield as added lightning damage to your main hand hits. In the offhand, the goal is to get as much attack speed as possible, really at the expense of everything else. And the best way to start is actually a bright beak. The super budget version is going to use just a regular bright beak, and then you can get one with an attack speed corruption, and that can go up to 2.21 attacks per second. So perfectly rolled corrupted bright beak 2.21, and you can actually craft a synthesized weapon. I'm using a claw that will actually take you up to 2.26. The craft is not very expensive, so if you only have, say, one div for your offhand, you can go get that corrupted bright beak. But if you've got 5 or 6, you can make a claw pretty easily. Because we're using the ephemeral edge, we want to get as much energy shield as possible. The more we have, the more lightning damage we do. It's not like Energy Blade where it cuts your energy shield in half, which is definitely the major downside of Energy Blade. Also, ephemeral edge has a 50% roll of energy shield built into it. So in this build, we get about 10,000. You can definitely get much more. You can invest more into this build than I did and get significantly more damage and defense. But I did all the Ubers. I did wave 30 Simulacrum Deathless. I accidentally did wave 30 Simulacrum with 65 lightning res because I changed a piece of gear right before and forgot to swap a res. And I don't even think I took any damage in the 30th wave. So that footage will be in the background at some point here. A lot of this gear is just energy shield gear, so crafting it is actually pretty straightforward. A lot of times you're just using a dense fossil, so you can just buy, 100 or 200 of those and craft a lot of your gear. I really enjoyed the crafting for this build. I find it a lot of fun to be looking for just big number when you're making gear. 350 plus ES on a helmet is really what we're going for, and then after that you just kind of get whatever suffixes you can. Let's quickly talk about the defensive layers of this build. It is incredibly tanky. The only thing this build can't tank is massive fizz hits like Uber Shaper Slams. And if you are actively attacking something, you are unkillable. And that's because we have a massive amount of energy shield leech and instant leech. Because we're CI, we don't have to worry about life or chaos damage. We have nearly 7,000 energy shield recovered per second on single targets. With our 10k ES pool, it's hard to do much better than that. We have a 100% chance to suppress spell damage. We're fully ailment immune. We have the 95 evade cap against all enemies, small amount of block, and the most important thing is that spell suppression has incredibly high effectiveness. So normally, if you have a 100% chance to suppress spells, you'll have a base of 50% reduction of those spells. Now, On Inveterate and the Mastery, you can get another 3 and 3. So now you're at 56% reduction, meaning if you take a spell hit of 100 damage, it will actually only do 44 damage to you. With the introduction of charms and that which was taken jewels, you can ramp this number up significantly higher. Trickster's Spellbreaker allows us to get 10% additional prevention when we're on full energy shield. And because we have Overleech and a massive amount of instant leech, we are always at max, just always. So that 56 number now becomes 66. You can get up to 6% on each of your charms, have 6, 6, and 4. So that's another 16%, bringing us to 82% spell damage reduction when you're at full ES. Don't have any on my that which was taken jewel, but you can get another 6% there with a theoretical cap of 90% reduction. I probably should have done this just for fun, but I ended up getting other things like spell suppression. Mana is extra ES to increase my ES pool, but having 90% spell reduction on top of 95% chance to evade means that you are not taking a lot of damage really in any scenario. You can pretty much face tank anything in the game that isn't a giant physical hit. On top of all of our ES leech, we have Ghost Shrouds. What Ghost Shrouds do is they take a percentage of your evasion and heal you for energy shield based on that percentage. So that means every time we take a hit with our Ghost Shrouds up, which we have 3, we'll get healed for 1700 energy shield. So provided the hit does less than 1700, we just stay at cap. If it does more, it might take a brief quick second for us to get our Overleech to get us back up to cap, and then our next Ghost Shroud can kick in. So provided you don't take 50 hits all in a row really quickly, your Ghost Shrouds are going to make up for all of that incoming damage, allowing us to stay at full ES. This defensive layer is one of the strongest I've ever experienced in the game. It feels absolutely amazing to play with. I regularly go AFK in maps to talk to chat or look at somebody's build, and I never have to worry about this character dying. So those are the main defensive layers. I'm sure I've forgotten some things. As far as damage goes, it's anywhere from 20 to 30 million depending on which buffs we have up. Now, we have a bunch of buffs. We have Ball Haste, we have the Haste Aura with some Specters, we have 2 totems, and they're not always all going to be up at the same time, so that's why I give a range. I usually have 2 or 3 of them up at any given time. You might put 2 totems down, one of them might die, or your Specters might die, so somewhere between 20 and 30 million is the DPS estimate, which feels really nice. I was doing very juiced wisps with essences, and very rarely did I come across one that took a while to kill, so single target damage is not really a problem. I'll say the biggest downside of this build is it's clear. Despite the fact that we run at almost 400% move speed at all times, we don't have huge explosions or huge clear, and it was honestly my least favorite part of the build. But we move so quickly between packs and we attack so quickly, up to 19 times per second. I would say that our massive move speed allows us to get from monster to monster very quickly, and it made the clear feel much better. I will say that the worst part of this build was getting +2 strikes on my gloves, and getting those extra strikes felt amazing. And that can be pretty expensive. I got very unlucky. I think I might have spent 15 divines just trying to get a second strike. Orb of Conflict is very expensive. Exceptional Ichors are very expensive. So you can get pretty unlucky there. So definitely go into this build willing to spend some money. But until then, you can use an Awakened Ancestral Call. That gives you 3 additional strikes. You're going to lose some single target damage, but you can put that in while you're mapping, and it adds a lot of clear. Why Dual Strike of Ambidexterity? What makes this skill so good? Aside from the fact that we can use just a super high attack speed offhand, and that will give us attack speed for both of our weapons, and that we can also use this big stat stick, the Ephemeral Edge, in our main hand, we also have access to Quick and Deadly. Quick and Deadly is a cluster jewel notable found on large clusters or megalomaniacs that gives you 60% increased main hand attack damage, which is most of our damage. It also gives us 30% increased attack speed with our offhand, which is used for both of our hands. There's nowhere in the game that you can get a notable that gives you 30% attack speed the way that Quick and Deadly works. But the reason that most people don't use this is because you have to be dual wielding 2 different weapon types. Dual wielding is not very popular, and dual wielding 2 different weapons is even less popular. But Dual Strike of Ambidexterity wants you to do this. Actually, it mandates it. You have to use 2 different weapon types in order to use this skill. We get Quick and Deadly on 2 large clusters, and we also take the Ambidexterity wheel on the tree. which is effectively the same stats. So these three nodes give us 90% attack speed and 180% increased damage. It's an absolutely phenomenal node, and they're worth building around. I PoB'd a version of this build that actually used Megalomaniacs as well, did less pathing on the tree, and got 4 more of these. The opportunity cost seemed a little bit high, but if you're interested in taking this build possibly to the next level, it might be something that you want to explore. So let's jump in. We'll talk about the details of the build, talk about things that I crafted, how you can craft them, and how you can actually take some of these gear slots to the next level and make this build even better than I did. Felt like I had done everything I needed to. I did all Ubers. I did Wave 30 Simulacrum Deathless, Super Juice maps. So I decided I was done upgrading the build, but there's definitely more that you can do if you want. So let's go. So let's talk about the gear pieces and what you can do differently if you want to upgrade this build further. Ephemeral Edge has 1 roll on it that matters. It is the maximum energy shield. I wanted to get a perfect roll, and I got Fortify as my corruption. You can get Resolute Technique here. What this does, it prevents you from needing accuracy. I have 2 fractured accuracy rolls on my gear here, and I also have this wheel on the tree, plus gain accuracy rating equal to your intelligence. We have almost 600 intelligence, so between those 2 rolls and this wheel, we are capped. Can go Resolute Technique, and that will save you 2 slots here and give you 4 points back on the tree. And then you'll just have to get Fortify on a Charm or that which was taken Jewel. Getting a 50 ES roll on one of those is very expensive. There are some other builds that are using this, so just keep that in mind. Depending on how much you want to spend on the build, we'll decide whether or not you should be using the Fortify roll here. Or in the helmet, we have a Hubris Circlet. I bought a fractured accuracy roll. All of these bases were 2 divines or less at the time of purchase. So bought the accuracy roll, and then I rolled it with dense fossils until I hit an incredibly high roll. I got very lucky to hit tier 1. I also happened to hit that lightning res, so I didn't even have to use Eldritch Currency, but that's what you would do with the suffixes. I needed to solve strength, so I got some strengthen in here, strengthen in here. Intelligence is really, really good for us, gives us a lot more ES, but basically that's all you're looking for. I stopped it when a unique enemy is nearby, Fizz taken as Chaos, because I very rarely feel like I'm in any danger outside of fights against pinnacle Uber bosses, so I thought that this one would be a little bit more valuable. In our offhand, you can use a Bright Beak with a corruption on it with high attack speed, or you can use something like this. Basically what I did was I used an Essence of Zeal to give us high attack speed until I hit some other useful stuff. Here we got lightning res and LE damage with attacks, and then I multi-modded on pen and lightning damage. If I didn't have that lightning res there, I would be going for double damage while focused, because we are already using focus on our gloves to get 45% attack speed. So this claw, you want a synthesized base. You want to start with a 1.6 base and then get a high roll of attack speed on it, and then use Harvest to add the attack speed per quality. Make sure that you have at least 24 quality on it, and you can get up to that 2.26 number, which I believe is the highest attacks per second in the game that you can get on any weapon. If you can get even higher, someone can let me know down in the comments. So we'll jump back to the gloves here. Getting +2 strikes is incredibly difficult. If you have bad luck, it can cost you a lot of divines, but I would say that this is pretty much mandatory if you want this to feel good for clearing. However, I did play this build for 2 days without it. I just had the +1 strike, and boy did it feel nice to get a 3rd. So basically the same thing here. We are just using dense fossils until we hit a very high roll of energy shield. We got tier 1, tier 1, tier 2 here. For me, that was good enough. 250 ES in your gloves is really, really nice. And then I locked and I used a Veiled Chaos Orb, and I got attack and cast speed while focused. That's super nice, and all you really need here. If you don't go for a Mage's Blood, you can replace a lot of these suffixes with resists, and you're pretty much going to be fine. For this ring, Chevron's Revelation, it's pretty cheap to get a perfect intelligence roll, and then you put defense catalysts on it, you get a massive amount of energy shield. 30 as the implicit, 300 from having it in your left ring slot. This disables recharge and regen, but we don't really care about either of those things. Between Ghost Shrouds and Overleech, we never have to worry about energy shield, so getting 330 flat and 75 in on our ring is worth giving those things up. For the amulet, we use Voices of the Storm alongside of Tribal Fury as our anoint. Getting splash damage makes our clear significantly better. The reason that we use Voices of the Storm is because we're not critting anyway, so all of our hits are going to be lucky. Lightning damage has a massive roll already. We also use volatility support, which makes the roll even bigger. And then using lucky allows it to roll twice. Anytime you see the word lucky in Path of Exile, it means it's going to give you 2 shots at rolling the damage, and it will pick the higher one. This amulet for us is about a 30% damage increase. Next, we'll talk about the boots. We have 95% chance to avoid bleeding. I want to finish this, or I wanted to finish this, but I never got around to getting to bleed cap. You just have to get 1 tier higher on the eater side, and you'd have 100%. Bleeds don't really matter on this build because of overleech, but I didn't really know what else I wanted on the suffix. Crafting these, I bought the fractured flat energy shield. I don't know if this is the best way to make these, but then I just spammed until I hit tier 1% and had an open prefix, and then I locked and used a veiled chaos orb to try to get a veiled prefix. If you hit a veiled suffix, it bricks. You gotta go again. If you hit a veiled prefix and you don't get move speed, you gotta go again. So I don't know that this is the best way to do this, but that's what I did. And I got a ton of move speed on my boots, 30%, 10 if you haven't been hit recently, and 5 is the implicit. Don't go for action speed because we're Trickster and we already have the action speed base of 108. So the 4% on your boots will do nothing. Intelligence rolls are very, very strong. Anywhere you can get them. I was lucky enough to get 55% here. On our chest, we have an intelligence fractured sadist garb. Getting any good prefix fractured is incredibly expensive, so I ultimately settled pretty hard on this. But 1900 evasion and 427 energy shield is a pretty nice chest. And then I reforged, and then I used Eldritch Currency to do the suffixes. I hit double res, which I actually wasn't even looking for. I was just trying to hit spell suppression, and I couldn't do it. I got really unlucky. But then in the process, I was able to hit double tier 1 resist, which is super lucky. So we stuck with that and got our spell suppression on a that which was taken jewel. This ring, really, really cool. Can be pretty challenging to craft. The way a manifold ring works is it gives you an extra prefix and removes 2 max suffixes. So you can only have 1 suffix, but you can have 4 prefixes. Prefixes for us are everything. The only suffix we really care about is intelligence. And then prefixes you can get on a Crusader base. You can get lightning damage against shocked enemies. You can get lightning damage to attacks. You can get elemental damage with attacks, percent ES and flat ES. All of those are phenomenal. I think the most important ones are getting at least tier 2 of flat ES and percent ES, and then you want to get at least 1 other good roll. For this, I hit 40 intelligence, which was pretty good, and then I crafted on elemental damage with attacks, and then all the prefixes get 50% increased magnitudes. So 25% ES, 71 flat, and 34% increased elemental damage with attack skills. This is a phenomenal ring, and you can craft this much, much better if you want to spend the time. In our belt, we have a Mage's Blood, just using it for the stats. We're using it to enable some pretty powerful flasks, but again, as I mentioned earlier, this is not mandatory. We only have the 35% resist flask here. You could easily make up for that if you go for the Resolute Technique sword, and then you don't need accuracy here, you don't need accuracy here. You can just get 1 strength roll instead of the 2 crafted ones and go for resist on your gear. Other things that we get from our flask, we get stun immunity from a suffix here. This build doesn't get stunned very often, but having stun immunity is very nice. We get that on an onslaught flask. Ton of onslaught effect, feels so good for attacking and moving. Bismuth flask has attack speed. Our movement speed has chance to avoid being shocked. We use this in combination with the Storm Shroud Jewel. That allows us to get 100% chance to avoid being shocked, which gives us 100% chance to avoid all elemental ailments. This number needs to be, I think, at least 52% on a 70% flask in order to get to 100. This is a Jade flask. It's got MTX on it. That's why it looks like that. It's giving us that whirly, windy effect around us. We use reduced mana cost of skills on here. This gets our mana cost down to 7. We don't even have a roll on our ring. If you don't go Mage Blood, you're just going to want to get a -7. Or on this ring, it would be, I think, -9 or 10. And this evasion helps us get to cap. For our 5th flask, we're using an Aurea's End. This isn't helping our clear that much. However, there's no really good 5th flask that's a unique. We can't use a life flask, so I just decided to throw this in to try to help with clear, because really that's the only problem the build has. But this is not mandatory. It doesn't feel that good to use, but I couldn't really think of anything else that I wanted here. So For 8th Ascend, it is. Let's go over the gems real quick. We have Ancestral Protector and Vol Ancestral War Chief. A little something people seem to not know is that if you use a Vol Ancestral War Chief, that gives you +1 max totems, which means you can cast both of these without multiple totems attached. Now, that means you have to have your Vol Ancestral War Chief up in order to use it, but I find this to not be a problem. I like to use it without multiple totems, and it saves me a gem slot. We use Whirling Blades for movement. Our movement speed is so fast, I don't even have a move skill that allows us to jump up and down cliffs, because at 400 move speed, I just run up the cliff. I just kind of run around to the entrance wherever things are. You're so fast that I didn't even feel like I needed it. In the helmet, we have our aura setup. We have a level 3 Enlighten. Thankfully, this build does not need a level 4. Discipline, Wrath, and Grace. Kind of a fun setup here. In the Claw, we have Warlord's Mark and Mark on Hit, as well as Berserk. The way Warlord's Mark is when you stun an enemy, you get 20 rage. We don't stun most enemies, but a lot of the lower life rares we do stun, which means while mapping, you're going to have really good uptime of max rage, which means you can use Berserk when you get to one of those really, really tanky monsters. Also, having a mark enables this wheel here, so 40% damage, reduced accuracy rating, increased damage taken, and then the mark mastery for a frenzy charge. Without a mark, you couldn't gain frenzy charges, and we can't use blood rage. So Warlord's Mark also gives us endurance charges. It's a pretty nice overall package and gives you decent uptime. Now, if you want to take out Mark on Hit and self-cast Warlord's Mark, you could keep up really high uptime of rage by self-casting it on a white mob, but Mark on Hit only auto casts on rares and uniques, and you don't always stun them. So if you wanted to throw in like a worm flask here, you could use self-cast Warlord's Mark to generate rage on those worms and then fight bosses and be able to use Berserk. I did not find that to be necessary. I took down all the Ubers without doing that, but if you want to do that, you can. In our boots, we have a setup that I don't love, to be honest. We're using Ray Spectre with 2 Dark Marionettes. You can see when I hit my haste, these things start to lose life. That's the way that Guardian's Blessing work. And what happens while you're mapping is they tend to take damage and they die at different times. And if they die at different times, you have full uptime of haste when 2 of them are kind of alternating which one is alive. If they die at the same time, you have to recast it. Now, it's an instant skill, so it's not a big deal to cast it. I don't mind doing it, but it is annoying. If you're really, really in juicy content, they're going to die all the time. So I don't love this setup, but for regular mapping, it's very, very nice. If I were to get rid of this, what I would probably do is do a big swap and take all the gems out of my chest, recraft the helmet to have some damage modifiers like the essence that gives 30% more damage, and then switch off of Primalist and go to a tincture. What that would allow us to do is take Oath of the Magi, where it doubles our body armor's defenses if there's no socketed gems. It does require a little bit different of a build. You're gonna lose some of the defenses from your helmet, but you are going to gain a massive amount of energy shield and evasion from taking this. I think the higher investment version probably wants to go this route. I didn't feel like doing that. I wanted to use the charms. I wanted to get all this max spell suppress, but you can go for the Oath of the Magi. You'll take Nature's Concoction, which gives 30% effect to one of your flasks, whatever you have in the slot next to your tincture. It's also going to give you Detect Evil, so your hits can't be blocked. But ultimately, I didn't feel like going that route. I really was excited about these charms. I got some pretty nice charms here. Effective Onslaught, Damage Pen, Culling Strike, and all of that additional reduction. So it's just something to think about if you want to make this build, that you can go for a pseudo 6-link helmet and take all the gems out of your chest. But because I had extra gem slots, I threw in this aura setup. In our gloves, we have a Frost Bomb, which is just nice for enemies that have a ton of regen, and then a cast when damage taken Immortal Call setup with increased duration. This makes our Immortal Call last a really long time. We also generate endurance charges from Warlord's Mark, so our Immortal Call lasts several seconds, and that's a ridiculous amount of less damage taken. I recommend getting a 23 quality. That'll allow you to get the most cooldown recovery rate for higher uptime. In our chest, here we have Dual Strike of Ambidexterity. We're linking it with Awaken Elemental Damage with Attack so we can run Reflect maps. We have Multi-Strike. Awaken Multi-Strike's like 90 Divines. I didn't want to spend that. Energy leech, this is nice because we're always leeching and we're always on full energy, which means we get the benefits of both sides of this. Awakened Lightning Pen gives us exposure, and Volatility gives us that really, really high max attack damage that Lucky is so good for. So we just talked about the charms. We'll talk about the Ascendancy. I'm taking Polymath for the more damage per mastery type allocated. Even though we have 2 clusters, we have a ton of different masteries. I have the Sword Mastery, Dual Wielding, Accuracy, Spell Suppression. I don't know how many there is, but there's a lot. This build just happens to path all over the place and take a lot of different masteries. So that makes Polymath super strong. It also gives us ES on kill, which we ultimately don't really need, but we have it. We also take one step ahead. This makes us immune to almost all slows in the game. This feels so, so nice. Running through delirious maps and not slowing down is very, very, very cozy. We take Escape Artist in Spellbreaker. We talked about Spellbreaker for Spell Suppress. Now, unfortunately, we lose the chance for recharge with the ring that we have, but we do not need it. I steal Soul Drinker with a Forbidden Flesh and Flame. Now, you don't have to steal Soul Drinker. You can take Spellbreaker, one step ahead, Polymath, or Soul Drinker for your Forbidden Flesh and Flame, which makes this really makes this a lot cheaper to set up, because if this gets expensive, you can just do one of the other ones. As far as the tree goes, we talked about our clusters. There's a lot of things that are good on clusters, but you got to get quick and deadly. Martial Prowess is good. Fuel the Fight is good. Combat Rhythm. This gives us 10 move speed and 10 attack speed. So tons of stuff that are good on those clusters. We get more ES on kill from Soul Thief. So I think in total we have like 12 or 13% ES on kill. Path down to this mastery for less physical damage taken on full ES. We use the Inversion Mastery on Elemental here. Super, super strong. Spell Suppress Mastery, we want to take +3 Prevent. That helps us get to that 82 number. We are also Precise Technique. Our maximum life is 1, so we're always at a higher accuracy rating. We never deal crits anyway, so 40% more attack damage is super nice for a couple of points. I chose to take this Sword Mastery in order to get more strike range. I don't know how much this is really helping. There's also a good note up here, a couple of extra points to spend. You can take the +1 strike on this attack mastery, and then Gladiator's Perseverance. We're always on full life, so 10 attack speed and 40 attack damage is super nice. Let's talk about the jewels. Our large clusters we talked about. We have that which was taken here. This is just going to solve some problems for you. I wanted to get mana as maximum energy shield for a bigger ES pool, and I also wanted to get Spell Suppress. Charge duration is just nice to have for our endurance charges. We use Storm Shroud with reduced curse effect. This allows us to get fully ailment immune. We have a couple of rares that are just basically energy shield, intelligence, and anything else good that we can get. Same thing going on over here. A little bit of rarity because we're magic finding. Again, more ES and intelligence. Forbidden Flesh and Flame for Soul Drinker, as we talked about. And then lastly, our Watcher's Eye. We have Evade Chance while affected by Grace. This helps us get to the cap. And Damage Pen while affected by Wrath. So, I think I tried to explain everything there. This build was unbelievable to play. It was so much fun. If you're interested in playing some actual melee, which this build is true melee, I highly recommend this. This can do all content easily. I didn't run into anything that really killed me outside of the Uber Shaper Slams, and then of course sometimes I misplay and I'm not very good at killing bosses, and I died in a couple other boss fights, but they're purely misplays. This build does not die. If you have any skill at all, you'll do everything deathless, and like I said, wave 30 Simulacrum with 65 lightning res, and I don't think I took any damage. So I can really, really highly recommend this. It is a little bit more expensive than my usual builds, but it is so easy to make money this league that you'd be crazy if you're not going out and farming MH blood. So that's going to be it for me. I'm already playing a new build. It is Ice Nova. We are doing full screen Ice Nova. It is so much fun. It's a very stark difference from this build. It has much lower single target damage. It's not very tanky, but it literally freezes the entire screen. It's super fun. If you want to check that out, you can come over to my Twitch, twitch.tv/AER0___. I am almost done being sick, so come over and support me there. If you want to support me here, you can like this video, comment down below, and subscribe to the channel. Hit that little notification bell so every time I post a video, you get a little notification to your phone. So thank you so much for watching. I appreciate each and every one of you. And as always, take care.